Antique photograph collector James Sullivan was sifting through a box of old family photos at a Chicago estate sale when one particular image stopped him cold. The photograph, dated August 1900 in faded ink, showed a chubby toddler sitting on a wooden porch, caught mid-laugh with his arms outstretched toward the camera. The child's joy was infectious, his mouth open in delighted laughter, his whole body radiating happiness. But something about the boy's eyes made James lean closer under the auction tent's fluorescent lighting. The child appeared to be perhaps 2 years old, with blonde curls and chubby cheeks typical of a healthy toddler. Yet around his eyes, the skin showed an unusual pattern of fine lines and slight discoloration that seemed far too aged for such a young child. "Excuse me," James called to the elderly woman running the sale. "Do you know anything about this photograph?" "The little boy?" Martha Henderson adjusted her glasses and examined the photo. "That came from my great-aunt's collection. She never had children of her own, but she collected photographs of families throughout her life. Said she wanted to preserve memories that might otherwise be lost." James studied the image more carefully. The photographic quality was typical for 1900, slightly sepia-toned, with the soft focus common to cameras of that era. But the detail around the child's eyes was remarkably clear, showing what appeared to be premature aging or some kind of unusual skin condition. The boy's clothing was well made, a crisp white sailor suit with navy trim, suggesting a prosperous family. His posture and expression showed no signs of illness or discomfort. In fact, he appeared to be the picture of childhood health and happiness, except for that peculiar aging around his eyes. "I'll take this one," James decided, adding it to his small collection. Something about the photograph intrigued him beyond its historical value. The contrast between the child's obvious joy and the mysterious condition around his eyes created a puzzle he felt compelled to solve. Dr. Patricia Wolfe, a pediatric dermatologist at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, examined the 1900 photograph through a magnifying glass in her office. James had contacted her after spending several sleepless nights wondering about the child's unusual appearance. "This is fascinating," Dr. Wolfe said, adjusting the desk lamp for better illumination. "The skin around his eyes shows characteristics of what we might today call premature aging, but in a very specific pattern. See these fine lines radiating outward? And this slight hyperpigmentation? Could it be a medical condition?" James asked, leaning forward in his chair. "Possibly. There are several genetic conditions that can cause accelerated aging of the skin, but they're extremely rare. What's interesting is that this appears isolated to the periorbital area, just around the eyes. The rest of his skin looks completely normal for a toddler." Dr. Wolfe pulled out a medical textbook and flipped to a section on pediatric skin conditions. In 1900, they wouldn't have had the medical knowledge to properly diagnose or treat such conditions. Families often just accepted unusual appearances as God's will or family traits. She studied the photograph again, noting the child's obvious health and happiness. "What strikes me is that he doesn't appear to be in any distress. Children with serious medical conditions often show signs of discomfort or developmental delays. But this boy looks completely normal except for the skin around his eyes." James pointed to the background of the photograph. "The setting looks prosperous. Nice house, well-maintained porch, quality clothing. This wasn't a poor family." "That's significant," Dr. Wolfe agreed. "Wealthy families in 1900 would have had access to the best medical care available at the time. They might have consulted specialists or tried various treatments." Dr. Wolfe made some notes on her pad. "I'd like to research this further. There are medical archives from that period that might contain references to unusual pediatric cases. If this child was seen by physicians in Chicago around 1900, there might be documentation." The Chicago History Museum's medical archives were housed in a climate-controlled basement, filled with century-old medical journals and physician case notes. James and Dr. Wolfe sat at a long table, surrounded by leather-bound volumes from Chicago's medical community circa 1900. "Here's something interesting," Dr. Wolfe said, reading from the Chicago Medical Journal. October 1900. Dr. Harrison Fletcher published a case study about unusual dermatological presentations in pediatric patients. He mentions examining several children with what he called localized cutaneous senescence. James looked up from a pile of physician directories. "Localized cutaneous senescence. That sounds like localized skin aging." "Exactly." Dr. Fletcher was one of Chicago's leading pediatric physicians. "If our little boy was from a wealthy family, They almost certainly would have consulted him. They found Dr. Fletcher's practice address in the 1900 medical directory, Michigan Avenue, in what was then Chicago's most prestigious medical district. The building still existed, though it now housed modern offices. "Look at this," James said, pointing to another journal entry. Dr. Fletcher mentions consulting with European specialists about unusual pediatric cases. He was apparently very progressive for his time. Dr. Wolf found a more detailed article from 1901. Dr. Fletcher writes about treating children with hereditary skin anomalies using experimental approaches. He mentions photography as an important diagnostic tool and treatment documentation method. The article described several cases of children with unusual skin conditions, including one that matched their photograph remarkably well. Male child, approximately 24 months, presenting with bilateral periorbital aging patterns. Child otherwise healthy and developmentally normal. Family seeking explanations and potential treatments. The timing matches perfectly, James realized. August 1900 photograph and Dr. Fletcher's case notes from late 1900 and early 1901. Dr. Wolf made photocopies of the relevant articles. We need to find out more about Dr. Fletcher's practice. If he was documenting cases with photography, there might be more records preserved somewhere. They discovered that Dr. Fletcher's medical collection had been donated to the Northwestern University Medical Library after his death in 1932. The Northwestern University Medical Library's special collections contained 3 boxes of Dr. Fletcher's case files, donated by his family decades earlier. The librarian, Ms. Chen, led them to a quiet reading room where they could examine the delicate documents. Dr. Fletcher was meticulous in his record-keeping, Ms. Chen explained. His files include detailed case notes, correspondence with other physicians, and quite a few medical photographs, unusual for that time period. In the second box, they found a file labeled Pediatric Dermatological Anomalies, 1900-1905. Inside were detailed case studies, including photographs that made James's heart race. There, among several medical images, was a photograph nearly identical to the one he had purchased at the estate sale. "That's him," James whispered, comparing the 2 images. "Same child, same time period, but this one is clearly a medical photograph." Dr. Wolf examined Dr. Fletcher's notes. Patient, William Morrison, age 2 years 3 months, presented September 1900 with bilateral periorbital aging syndrome. Parents report condition present from birth, gradually becoming more pronounced. Child otherwise healthy, meeting all developmental milestones. The medical notes described various treatments attempted, including topical preparations and dietary modifications. Dr. Fletcher had consulted with colleagues in New York and London about similar cases. "Look at this correspondence," Dr. Wolf said, unfolding a letter dated October 1900. Dr. Fletcher is writing to a colleague in London about hereditary conditions that affect skin aging. He mentions the Morrison case specifically. James found treatment notes spanning several years. William was seen regularly through 1904. Dr. Fletcher tried various approaches, some experimental treatments, using plant extracts and mineral preparations that were available at the time. The files showed that Dr. Fletcher had eventually concluded William's condition was hereditary and not treatable with available methods, but that the child could live a completely normal life. The last note, dated 1905, mentioned that the family was moving to California for the father's work. Ms. Chen pointed to a notation in Dr. Fletcher's handwriting. He writes here that he's recommending the family pursue social adaptation strategies rather than continued medical intervention. Very progressive thinking for 1900. Dr. Fletcher's files contained the Morrison family's contact information and some personal details that helped James and Dr. Wolf trace their story. William's father, Thomas Morrison, had been a successful businessman in Chicago's meatpacking industry before relocating to Los Angeles. Using genealogical databases, they discovered that the Morrison family had indeed moved to California in 1905. Thomas Morrison established a successful import business in Los Angeles, and the family lived comfortably in the growing city. James found census records showing William Morrison living with his family through 1920, when he would have been in his early 20s. The records listed his occupation as bookkeeper, suggesting he had received a good education and found stable employment. Despite his unusual appearance, Dr. Wolf located a 1910 newspaper article from the Los Angeles Times mentioning the Morrison Family's involvement in local charity work. The article included a small photograph of family members at a fundraising event, and William was clearly visible, now a young man but still showing the distinctive aging around his eyes. He looks healthy and confident, Dr. Wolf observed. The condition doesn't seem to have held him back socially or professionally. They found marriage records showing William Morrison married Sarah Collins in 1923. The couple had settled in Pasadena, where William worked as an accountant for a growing construction company. James discovered that William and Sarah had 2 children, a daughter born in 1925 and a son in 1928. Birth records showed both children were born healthy, with no mention of unusual medical conditions. The condition wasn't passed to his children, Dr. Wolf noted. That suggests it might have been a spontaneous genetic mutation rather than a hereditary trait. They found records of William Morrison's death in 1967 at age 69, indicating he had lived a full, normal lifespan, despite his unusual appearance. His obituary described him as a devoted family man and active community member. He proved Dr. Fletcher right, James realized. The condition was purely cosmetic. He lived a complete, successful life. With William Morrison's full medical history available, Dr. Wolf was able to research his condition using modern medical knowledge. She consulted with colleagues in genetics and dermatology to better understand what they had discovered. Based on all the documentation, William appears to have had what we would now classify as a form of progeria, but an extremely localized variant that affected only the skin around his eyes. Dr. Wolf explained during a meeting with James and several medical colleagues. Dr. Martinez, a geneticist, examined the historical photographs and medical notes. Progeria typically affects the entire body, causing accelerated aging throughout. This appears to be a unique variant that affected only the periorbital skin. Extremely rare, but not impossible. The medical team reviewed current literature on aging disorders and found only a few documented cases of such localized accelerated aging. William's case from 1900 was actually one of the earliest documented examples of this specific condition. Dr. Fletcher's treatment approach was remarkably sound for 1900, noted Dr. Stevens, a pediatric dermatologist. He correctly identified that the condition was cosmetic rather than systemic, and he advised the family to focus on adaptation rather than pursuing potentially harmful treatments. James learned that William's condition would likely have been caused by a genetic mutation affecting collagen production, specifically in the periorbital region. The mutation would have been spontaneous, explaining why his children weren't affected. Dr. Wolf found references to similar cases in modern medical literature. There have been perhaps a dozen documented cases of localized progeria affecting only specific areas of the skin. Most patients live completely normal lives with normal lifespans. The research revealed that William's case had actually been ahead of its time in terms of medical documentation and understanding. Dr. Fletcher's approach of accepting the condition rather than attempting risky treatments had been the optimal course of action. What's remarkable is how well the family adapted, Dr. Martinez observed. In 1900, physical differences were often much more stigmatizing than they are today, yet William apparently thrived socially and professionally. Research into William Morrison's later life revealed remarkable insights into how a family in 1900 had successfully helped their child navigate social challenges created by his unusual appearance. James found correspondence in Dr. Fletcher's files between the physician and William's parents, discussing strategies for helping their son develop confidence and social skills. The letter showed a progressive approach to dealing with physical differences. Dr. Fletcher advised the parents to be completely open with William about his condition. Dr. Wolf read from a 1902 letter. He recommended explaining that it was simply how William was made, no different from having brown eyes instead of blue. School records from William's time in Chicago showed he had attended regular classes and performed well academically. Teachers' notes indicated he was well liked by classmates and showed natural leadership abilities. The family's move to California in 1905 was strategic, James discovered. Los Angeles was growing rapidly, full of newcomers. William could start fresh where his appearance wouldn't be as remarked upon. Dr. Wolf found evidence that the Morrison family had been active in early advocacy for children with physical differences. They had quietly supported other families dealing with similar challenges and had contributed to charitable organizations focused on children's welfare. High school records from Los Angeles showed William had been active in debate club and student government, suggesting his confidence and communication skills were well developed. He had graduated with honors in 1918. His success in business makes sense, James observed, looking at employment records. Accounting and bookkeeping were professions where competence mattered more than appearance, and William was clearly very capable. The family's approach had been to acknowledge William's difference while emphasizing his many normal qualities and abilities. They had prepared him for social interactions without making him feel self-conscious or limited. Wedding photographs from 1923 showed William and Sarah's ceremony was well attended, indicating he had maintained strong friendships and social connections throughout his life. William Morrison's case, as documented by Dr. Fletcher, became an important early example of successful management of rare pediatric conditions. Modern physicians studying his case were impressed by the enlightened approach taken by both the family and their doctor. Dr. Wolfe presented William's case at a pediatric dermatology conference, using it to illustrate how proper patient and family support could lead to excellent outcomes even with unusual medical conditions. The case generated significant interest among medical professionals. Dr. Fletcher's documentation was extraordinary for 1900, Dr. Wolfe explained to the conference attendees. He understood that the psychological and social aspects of treatment were as important as the medical aspects. James discovered that Dr. Fletcher had published several papers about pediatric care that referenced William's case anonymously. These papers had influenced other physicians to adopt more holistic approaches to treating children with unusual conditions. Modern genetic analysis of similar cases showed that William's condition was indeed a rare form of localized progeria. Researchers found that approximately 1 in 10 million children might be born with similar localized aging conditions. The key insight from William's case is that rare doesn't necessarily mean problematic, explained Dr. Martinez. His condition was unusual but not harmful. The family's positive approach allowed him to thrive. Medical historians studying Dr. Fletcher's work found that he had been ahead of his time in understanding the importance of psychological support for families dealing with unusual medical conditions. His approach had influenced a generation of pediatric physicians. William's successful life story became a teaching tool for medical students learning about patient care and family support. His case demonstrated that proper guidance could help families navigate even the most unusual circumstances. The Morrison family's approach to William's condition had essentially created an early model for what would later become standard practice in treating children with visible differences. The mystery of how William's photograph had ended up in Martha Henderson's great-aunt's collection led James on one final research trail. He discovered that Dr. Fletcher had maintained relationships with many of the families he had treated, often keeping copies of photographs for medical education purposes. Martha's great-aunt, Eleanor Hartwell, had worked as a nurse in Dr. Fletcher's practice from 1898 to 1920. She had assisted with many of his pediatric cases and had developed a particular interest in helping families cope with children's medical conditions. James found letters between Eleanor and the Morrison family that continued long after they moved to California. Eleanor had become like an extended family member, celebrating William's milestones and offering support during challenging times. Eleanor collected these photographs not out of curiosity, but out of love, Martha explained when James shared his discoveries with her. She told me these were pictures of children whose lives she had helped improve through her work with Dr. Fletcher. After Eleanor's retirement, she had remained in contact with dozens of families, following the progress of children she had helped care for. William's photograph was just one of many she had treasured as evidence of successful outcomes. Dr. Wolfe found that Eleanor had been instrumental in developing early support networks for families dealing with unusual pediatric conditions. She had connected families with similar experiences and had helped create informal support groups. Eleanor Hartwell was doing social work before it was formally recognized as a profession, Dr. Wolfe realized. Her approach of maintaining long-term relationships with families was revolutionary for that time period. The photograph collection represented Eleanor's life work, documentation of children who had overcome challenges through proper medical care, family support, and social adaptation. Each image told a story of resilience and success. James learned that Eleanor had occasionally shared these stories, without names, with young nurses and medical students, using them as teaching tools about the importance of comprehensive patient care. William's photograph had been preserved not as a medical curiosity, but as a celebration of a life well lived despite unusual circumstances. The investigation had transformed a puzzling antique photograph into a comprehensive story of medical innovation, family courage, and social adaptation in early 20th century America. William Morrison's life represented a remarkable success, story from an era when children with unusual conditions often faced limited opportunities. James donated the original photograph and all related research to the Northwestern University Medical Library, where it joined Dr. Fletcher's collection as part of a comprehensive archive documenting early pediatric care innovations. Dr. Wolfe published a detailed case study in the Journal of Pediatric Dermatology, using William's story to illustrate how historical medical cases could inform modern patient care approaches. The paper received widespread attention in medical education circles. Martha Henderson was moved to learn the full story behind her great-aunt's photograph collection. She decided to donate the entire collection to the medical library, ensuring that Eleanor's documentation of successful patient outcomes would be preserved for future researchers. The Morrison family descendants, located through genealogical research, were delighted to learn about their ancestors' historical significance. William's grandson provided additional family photographs and stories that enriched the historical record. Medical schools began using William's case as a teaching tool, demonstrating how proper family support and medical guidance could help children with rare conditions achieve full, successful lives. His story became part of standard curriculum in pediatric care programs. The investigation had revealed that what initially appeared to be a medical mystery was actually a success story, evidence of enlightened medical practice and family adaptation. That was decades ahead of its time. William Morrison's laughing face in that 1900 photograph now served a new purpose, inspiring modern physicians and families to approach unusual medical conditions with confidence, creativity, and hope. Dr. Fletcher's progressive approach to pediatric care, Eleanor Hartwell's compassionate nursing, and the Morrison family's courage had created a model of comprehensive patient care that remained relevant more than a century later. The little boy's joyful laughter, captured in that long-ago photograph, had transcended its original moment to become a symbol of resilience, adaptation, and the power of proper support to help children thrive regardless of their differences. His unusual eyes, once a source of medical mystery, were now understood as simply one variation in the wonderful diversity of human appearance.